Hi there, welcome to another episode of the Bonsai Stuff Podcast. I'm Scott Martin from Bonsai Matsu, and thank you for listening in. Welcome to summer. This is it. It's finally here, and if the last week of spring is anything to go by, then I'm not filled with confidence that this is going to be a pleasant period for us. Catastrophic storms, lots of photos of trees blown off benches, including myself, broken pots, hail the size of mangoes up in the north in Brisbane. It's these major storm cells that roll through seem to have a pretty serious impact on our poor little trees in pots. So it's just a reminder to all of us, I suppose, just to be on guard. Change of season always brings this uncertainty, this storm weather. But I heard the other day someone from the Bureau was talking about storm period sort of lasts from November through until April these days. So there's 6 months of the year where there's potential storms rolling through and doing some pretty serious damage. I saw some photos, some images from Sunshine Coast from mate Andrew, whose yard seemed to get decimated by the strong winds and branches and trees down. So just a reminder: take care, tie your trees down to the benches properly, and make sure that you don't turn your back on them. Don't get complacent because the heat isn't going to be the only thing that we have to worry about these days with everything going on. Anyway, podcast, let's get into it. I want to talk a little bit about an experience I had recently with the Scots pine on shading of the trees and why that shading can have a serious setback to the advancement of your trees, and it can catch you by surprise very, very quickly. The other thing I want to talk about is the timing of tasks. We're coming into decandling season. That's happening with all the black pines, as I'm sure anyone that listens to this podcast would be well aware. Love my black pines, and I love spending time with them. Love working on them. Love advancing them. So decandling is going to be something we focus on. So I want to talk about timing of different tasks, seasonal tasks, maintenance tasks, and how you've really got to accommodate for your local area. So the shading one I think will be really interesting because it's something that I see a lot with trees, whether it's the positioning of the trees or the way that they're rotated or not rotated around it positioning of branches, all that sort of stuff. So I think it'll be an interesting component to the podcast and maybe give you something to look at as you're working through your trees. So let's get into it. So I was working on one of my beautiful Scots pines the other day. Pretty of a late candle cutting episode for the tree, just wasn't quite ready, so I'd hold it back a little bit. Anyway, it's doing really well, looks fantastic. One of my favourite trees, got some lovely deadwood on it, great character. And when I was working through it, going through the candle cutting process, I was working from the top, which is really nice and healthy, and looking at all the foliage from the outside. Like I do my health assessment number one on the tree before I did anything, looked at it and went, fantastic, this thing's in perfect condition. It's doing really, really well, really happy with it. So it's obviously clear to get into the process that I want to go through. So I start working through the top, and of course I expect, and don't forget the topic is shading for this part of the podcast. I expected, with it being so full on the exterior of the apex, that as I pulled apart the curtains and had a bit of a look in there, I'd see some dead branches. Where the bud conveyor, I'd failed it because I'd just let it get too thick, which is just par for the course when this happens in spring, and sort of a really good reason to do the maintenance on your trees to make sure that you are opening them up and letting that sunlight in there. But yeah, I did that, and at the apex, looked at it, wasn't too bad. Few little dead needles, old needles in there, few little dead branches. I went, that's fine, that's perfect, that's no problems at all. So I worked down to the next lot of pads. Yep, they're all okay too. I can see where everything's got lots of sunlight. But as I get down further and further, so I'm moving into the weaker zones on the tree, the weaker areas, the weaker branches, weaker pads. The external growth looked really good, and that was part of the health assessment, was to monitor and see whether what was happening at the top of the tree was the same as what was happening at the lower part of the tree, and it was good from what I could see. But then as I start pushing back further into those inner areas on those pads, back towards the trunk line, forgetting even the need to separate the foliage to have a look inside the pad, as I started working from the exterior tip of the pad and started working my way in, doing the cutting process. Yep, good. Get to it and go, well, hang on a minute. Now these buds here not only haven't grown very much, but they're actually looking pretty weak and spindly. Like, what's the reason for that? It was repotted when it should have been. the whole process. Went through everything. There's no pests. There's no issues with watering. The watering's been flowing through there. I've got plenty of fertilizers being put on this tree, nice and strong. Where it is in the yard, it's a lovely sunny spot for my pine, so I know it's done really well. It's been on this bench for quite a long time. Open all the way around, lots of airflow all around this tree, but the inner areas are no good. So then I look at it and I think to myself, it's the shading. It's the sun's coming higher in the sky, so the sun's then starting to come further straight down on top of the tree during the middle of the day when the heat's starting to kick in. It's a bit shaded in the morning, so it doesn't get that lower light coming into those inner areas. So, and the afternoon sun's fine. So the other branches on the other side, that sun gets into those inner areas, no problem. But this part of the tree that I was looking at is too shaded. And it just reminds me that you've got to look at rotating your trees on the bench so they get to share the sun. But then you've also got to have an approach or tactics to make sure that you're getting the sun into those inner areas of your tree. So for me, when I look at a tree, when I have it on the bench in front of me and I contemplate and I look at it and go, okay, so top down. The top down view is really important when I finish working on the trees. And I've talked about it before, where one of the last things I'll do is after I've styled a tree and I've made it look beautiful and it's ready to go, it's the photos all nice, all pretty. One of the last things that I'll do is look from the top down on the tree and make sure that I've got all of those branches at a point where they're not covering or sitting on top of one another. So the shading isn't going to be an impact. It's going to make sure that each pad gets enough sunlight. And that's good at the design stage. That's good at that point where I've done major work on the tree. For a pine, it might be the autumn winter period where I've been through and I've done the work and I've bud selected and I've wired and I've shaped and I've made it look really, really pretty. That's perfect. But what happens with our trees when we put them back on the bench? And it might be 2-3 years before that tree gets restyled. It goes into the maintenance program where I'm doing things like decandling and needle plucking and bud selection and maybe a touch of wiring here or there, but pretty much it's in the maintenance program. It's not in the design program. So what happens with it is it starts to fill up, that process of 1 to 2. One branch turns into 2, which means that the foliage mass on every one of those trees is doubling every year, which means the shading, the further time goes on with your trees, the more shading becomes an issue. So shading isn't something that you will simply look at when you're designing the tree. It's definitely consideration, major consideration, but it's something that every single time that you look at your tree, every single time that you get out there and do a slight bit of cutting of some new foliage or you're shaping it or making it look nice, that shading, especially those inner areas, it's critical, absolutely critical. And for me, it was a bit of a kick in the bum because I had this tree, looks beautiful, and it's not set back. Like it's not gonna have dieback on these areas, but it's definitely something that I looked at and I got a bit of a shock because when I was working through it, I didn't expect it to be as bad as what it was just on those inner areas. And my approach to the bud conveyor, right? The bud conveyor is one of, if not the most important thing that we do with our trees because it allows us to maintain the integrity of the design. It allows us to shorten branches that get too long. And when you get this shading on those inner areas and those inner buds become very, very weak, then that bud conveyor then starts to look a bit iffy. And it's always predominantly, not always, I shouldn't say the word always, but predominantly it's on those weaker areas as well that you start to see it. So the areas where you're going to struggle with later on because they're weak anyway, you've suddenly got all those inner buds that are closest to the trunk that look like they're on death's doorstep. Or if they're not, they're really not thriving. The needle length is always a little bit longer. The distance between the needle sets starts to get longer and longer. So that tree is telling you, hey, I'm reaching for the sun. I'm trying to go out and get as much sun as I possibly can. And there's something stopping me from doing it. So whatever's causing that needs to be corrected. Simple. There's no other way to say it. You need to correct it so sunlight can get into that inner area of the tree. And it may well be that, wiring the branch that's above it needs to be shuffled over a little bit. You might need a slight calculated redesign to let more light and air into those inner areas. The thinning process, going through the maintenance, doing candle cutting for me with my trees, certainly allowed a lot more light into that, because you're taking off a bloody big significant amount of foliage when you're doing these things. It's like taking a maple and or a native and you prune it back. Like you take off, maybe 15 to 30% of the foliage comes off when you're doing this pruning process at this time of the year, where you've got those long extensions, all those extensions, all that long growth that's there provides a hell of a lot of shading to those inner areas back in there. I was working on an English elm the other day, and what prompted me to actually get my scissors out was I was thinking, I probably want it to shoot out a little bit longer. I want a bit more growth all over the tree. But what was happening, it's such a beautifully balanced tree, medium-sized tree, beautifully balanced tree that was all growing at the same rate, and that new foliage was really starting to cover out and block everything else. As the growth started, first couple of leaves were quite small, medium size. Then the next lots start to get a lot bigger, and as it got those bigger leaves further out, it provided a lot more shade to the inner areas of the tree. So when I got up close and personal with it and had a quick look at it, I could see that there were yellowing leaves in the interior part of the tree. Not getting enough sunlight, the tree's not going to waste its time unless it's doing something for the tree, unless it's photosynthesizing, producing sugars for the tree. There's no point in the tree keeping those leaves alive. It's just a waste of energy and resources when those external new leaves that are more efficient solar panels, because they're a lot newer, a lot stronger. They'll be capable of doing the job a lot better than the older leaves. It's just like, well, let's just let them go, which is not what I want, because I want to protect those inner buds for, yep, you guessed it, the bud conveyor. It's the most important thing to me. So when I was working on this English elm, not only did I have to prune back all the new growth, but I had to make sure that those inner areas in the canopy, on pads, whatever it was, were longer term going to get enough sunlight so those inner buds would stay viable for me. So later on, in a year's time, 2 years' time, whatever it's going to be, those buds can start to grow because they're going to get enough sunlight in there, and they can push and they can become the future silhouette of my design that I'm trying to achieve with that tree. So with this Scots pine, coming back to it, I did the work, I had a look at it, and then I thought, well, what do you do when you've got a tree that's got this shading issue? What are the processes that I go through? For me, thinning is a word which gets thrown around a lot with bonsai. Always does. Especially after the spring growth. You look at it, and I like to give the trees a bit of a haircut, as I've said many times, before the summer period. Just give them a bit of a break, work with the older foliage, got more waxy coating on it, blah, blah, blah. All the stuff that I rabbit on about, right? So when I'm working through this thinning process, it's something which you can really muck around with the integrity of the design by going through the thinning process too early. All right, so my approach to it is, which is really simple. I focus on the essential tasks which need to be done, and for me, number one essential task is the unders of the pads. No matter what tree it is, it doesn't matter what variety it is. I want a nice clean bottom profile of my pad. So I will go through whether it's a native, whether the pad looks like it's sitting up and out, or whether it's a pine pad which is coming down, or a juniper pad, whatever it is, doesn't matter what. Anything that's growing underneath those branches is target one for me to remove. So I know that's got to go. So I'll get rid of it. I'll remove it. I'll take it off. And then once I've done that process, then I'll start working on the shape or the profile that I want of the different areas of the tree. Always start at the top of the tree when you're cleaning, work your way down. So I'll go through and I'll clean the unders of the apex. As that apex is looking out to you, and there's a break between the apex and say the first couple of pads that are floating around the top of the tree, I'll make sure that there's a really clear line. Like I can see some of those secondary branches that are coming out and the ramification branches that are coming up from the edges of the apex. So I'll clean it really thoroughly. Then I'll start working. So, okay, well, what is the shape of my apex? What is the flow? What is the direction of my tree? So, what does my apex have to look like? Does it have to come sharp from one side and come down to the other, or does it come sharp from the other side and then start to come down? So I'll start working on the shape of the apex that I want to have in a round fashion, right the way around the whole tree. I'll work on that part first. And then I'll start working my way through the pads. Do the same thing with the pads where I'll be coming from underneath. I'll clean the bottom of the pads. Then I'll say, okay, so what is the top-down shape of the pad that I want? What sort of, am I going for, a semicircle, whatever? Talked about it many times. Then I'll start working on the front to back profile. Like I want it to start low at the front, lift up, and then go back. And I want to go left and right. I want it to droop down to the sides of the pad as well. I don't want to have a flat pad. I want to have something with a bit of texture to it, a bit of shape. And I'll work my way through the whole tree. I'll get all of that done. And then, only then do I start thinking about the thinning process, because often you'll jump into thinning your bonsai too soon. And what that'll mean is that you'll end up removing more of that volume. I talked about building ramification on trees. Often when you'll get in and start doing the thinning process, secondary to what we talked about last week, you'll start removing a lot of that volume. So therefore you find your pad will become very flattened. It won't have that beautiful shape to it, because you'll be cutting those middle sections that you look at and go, geez, that's thick. There's so much foliage in there. It's a long shoot. I'm going to cut that out. You may need to. You may need to. Once you've done, the cleaning, the maintenance, the essential part, and the shaping part, and the profile part, then, yeah, sure, you may still come back and go, well, you know what, I still need to cut that out because it's just too thick. Perfect. Do it then. Don't destroy the shape or the structure of your bonsai too early. It'll set you back. So shading for me is, and this is where, when I had a good hard look at myself and I look at this tree, and I'm critical of myself. The average punter may look at the trees and go, they look fantastic. Geez, they look nice. But for me, it's the one percenters. It's the little things. It's the stuff that makes a big difference. That tree taking, quantum leaps every year and getting better and better and better and becoming, as I said, the best bonsai in the world is my target for every single tree that I have. So when I get a little bit of a setback like this, it's like, you can't take your eye off the prize. You can't turn your back on it. Even for a short period of time, it can have a massive impact. Like the spring growth period is, put a figure on it. It's 3 months, thereabouts. Sometimes more, sometimes less, but that's the next part of the podcast. But that growth period that we get, that short period, like it's not even a blink in that tree's life. You might find that you do some serious damage or serious setback to your tree that won't be recovered, because even I've gone through now and I've thinned it out and I've got more sunlight coming into those inner areas. When am I going to see the result of that? More than likely next spring. So I've got to wait 12 months now before that tree's health and strength in that area, particular area of the tree, starts to really do its thing. So there's a 12-month pause put on the development of those inner areas in those lower branches on that particular tree. Is it ideal? No, it's definitely not. Is it the end of the world? No, it's not. But it's something that, it's shading. It applies to all of your trees. Doesn't matter which one it is. Where our design that we choose for our trees, what we want them to look like, that's up to us. That's completely up to us, and it's up to you. It's your choice on whether the branch goes up, goes down, goes left, goes right, goes front, goes back, goes whatever. But we're all restricted by the horticultural constraints of how that branch is going to be affected by the sunlight access that it gets, or more importantly, that it doesn't get. So it's just something that you need to be on the ball for, and make sure that you're ready for it. Don't get caught by surprise like some people like me do. Having a lot of trees, you can take your eye off the ball pretty quickly, and you'll pay the price for it, or your tree will anyway. Okay, so we all have critical tasks that are time sensitive. extremely time sensitive, some of them. Some of them you've got a really, really small window. Others it's a bit broader. There's not quite as much of a rush. So I'll give you a couple of examples. So decandling for me, really, really specific, really shortened window. I've got to be ready to go. I've got to have sleepless nights getting ready for it and make sure that I get it done. Not just for me, but for everyone else that is wanting anything done like that. So your window for me is time critical. Other things like pruning my junipers, not quite as time critical. I've got an extended period, which means that I can sit down, enjoy the process. I'm not under as much pressure to work on them as what I am with my pines. And same as lots of things. Lots of things need pruning at certain times of the year. But and this is where I've talked about the bonsai care calendars, and they're a great start. They're a great foundation. I'm trying to be really positive about them because I do have an issue with them in that I think that you need to, at a base level, you walk in to bonsai, you're brand new to it, you go, just help me out. Just give me something which will put me on the right track for what I'm trying to achieve. Okay, cool. These are some really broad guidelines as to when you can do these things. And then you need to then take that to the next level where you start thinking about the climate in your area. And I've talked about this a little bit lately, but it's really, really important as we get closer and closer to tasks like decandling on black pines and red pines. As that starts to get closer and closer to me, it makes me think more and more about where you live, where your trees are, and there's all different regions, all different zones. I saw a long time ago. I haven't looked for a while, but I saw a long time ago through America where they had the continent set up where it was all in different zones, and based on the different zones that they have, is different timing for different parts of work on trees. And in Australia, we don't have that real zoning. We have a tropical, temperate. There's different words that get thrown around for it, but we don't sort of break into bands or zones based on where we are because it changes from suburb to suburb. You drive 5 minutes down the road, it may be slightly different to where you are. And this is where I just strongly encourage you to really be on the ball and study. Get to know how your trees grow in your climate, and then adapt your processes and the way that you manage the work that's done on them to your area. You can work in a slightly broader area, like you could say, for instance, I'm in Melbourne, in Victoria, in Australia, and you could work on a Melbourne based timing on things. That's a good guide. But then as you start to work on things a little bit more, you might go, well, where I am, I get sea breeze. So does that have an impact on how I manage my trees? Certainly may impact on how the watering process is done, because with so much more wind, you might find that your trees are drying out. You might find that you're in an area in a suburb, say that's a little bit further away, getting closer to sort of some larger trees, more rainforest, maybe not rainforest, but more forest-based, and it's a slightly damper environment. You don't get as much sunlight. You don't get as much wind, so the trees tend to stay wetter for a longer period of time. Okay, so when some muppet like me comes and says, "Oh, I'm watering my trees 4 times a day," you watering your trees 4 times a day might result in overwatering. Whereas somewhere else might go 4 times. I have to do it 6 times because they're really seriously drying out. And if I don't, then I'm going to pay a price for it. My trees are going to pay the price. So knuckling down from a higher level to a lower, a more centralized local impact for your area is super smart. And this is where bonsai clubs, there's a love-hate relationship with a lot of bonsai clubs, but there's a real strong side because generally people that go to them are based in that local area. And you can hear things in a general term talked about on on podcasts, on YouTube, on wherever. But then you can knuckle down a little bit further at that local level where you can say, hey, I heard this numbnut Scott on bonsai stuff talk about blah blah blah. What do you do? What's it like for you? And I'm very cautious when I give out advice or I get asked for my opinion on things because I try and make sure that I quantify it and justify it to say, hey, for me in my yard, I have found this. And I know it's a grey area. It's often ambiguous. It's very hard to pinpoint and knuckle down when you're at the start. But going through season after season after season and seeing the impact of things, what the result is, keeping notes. When you're trying to fine tune something, when you're trying to get it perfect, I find that keeping notes on things that you can look back on later on is brilliant. Looking at when you cut your deciduous, what was the impact? Was there a result of a second cut? Had that tree been repotted? What was your fertilizing regime? Did you find anything extraordinary? Did summer kick in early that year? Was it a wet spring? Was there excess rainfall? Was there a storm season? Did you find it was super windy? What did the wind do to the trees? So then when you can feel in your bonsai waters that when the next time that happens, you can go, well, hey, I know from my experience that when this happened last time, I need to do this, whatever it is, Maybe being a slightly cooler spring means that you can fertilize for a little bit longer on trees, And my point, I'm rambling on a little bit, but my point with it is when it comes time to do time-sensitive tasks, you need to make sure that they are thoroughly accurate to your particular area. So let's talk about decandling. If you need to know something simple with your bonsais, knowing what the growing periods are. All right, so you've got the growing period of spring and the growing period of autumn. If you're in an area where you're getting those 4 seasons, then they should be your. I'm trying to be vague. They should be your growing periods for your tree. One's a foliage growth. The other one, autumn, starts to be a little bit of foliage, but then it becomes a strength building process to get ready for the dormancy period. So understanding those growth periods lets you know what your timing of tasks are going to be. So with something like decandling, you're hitting the reset button on the tree. You're cutting off all that growth. If you've decided that tree is strong enough and healthy enough and can go through that process, then you are hitting the reset button and saying, okay, now I want you to activate those dormant buds, grow more buds for me, but only within this window of time because I want shorter internodes, I want ramification, and I want shorter needles on my trees. So I can do it by hitting that reset button at the right time. But what's the right time? And this is my point on this thing, because as we're about to get into it, you're going to start seeing plenty of photos, lots of talk about it. It's going to be the thing to do with your trees, but is the timing of it right for you? And understanding your growing period. Like if you've got a shorter growing period on your black pines, then hitting that reset button, going through the decandling process, means that it's got to start earlier, because the tree's going to go to sleep, get to dormancy sooner than say my trees will. But if your growing period is longer, say the stop button, and this is the most important part, is when does the tree stop growing? When will it stop pushing that new growth? When will it stop extending the needle length on that tree? After you've done the decandling. Because if you're decandling, say at X time and it's stopping at Y, if Y is really close to X, then you've got to push that starting time earlier. Whereas if that stopping point, that Y, is a lot later, then if you're decandling, say, very soon, then the growing period's still got a long way to go, which means that you're going to end up with long internodes and you're going to end up with long needles. So you're going to have a real issue with the new growth that's going to come on the trees. And while I'd expect it's not something you're going to have completely nailed down straight away, like now, like this year, it is something that over time you can start to fine tune. So this is where, step one is you walk in, what do I do? When do I do it? I love these trees. Seek out advice. Seek out someone that's close to your area that you trust, friends, mates, bonsai network, people like me, bonsai professionals, nurseries that you look at their trees and go, yeah, that. I really like their growth. Hey, what's your process? What do you do? Start gathering the facts. Don't just listen to advice. See the advice. See the trees. Make sure that you're happy with, how their bonsai look, and then get the advice, because anyone can give you an opinion. Doesn't mean that necessarily they're following it or that what they're telling you produces the results that you want. But then start doing your own research. Start making your own notes. Start becoming the professional in your own backyard, where you look at it and you can be the person that goes, well, I know what you're saying, but for me, in my climate where I am, I've slightly adjusted it. And look at the results. Don't just adjust things for the sake of adjusting them. Actually adjust them because it's going to give you the result that you want. It's going to give you the best bonsai in the world. That's going to make your tree absolutely amazing. And I know I'm talking about black pines for now, but that's just the instigator for this conversation. And the thought bubble in my head was that, these time-sensitive tasks really need to be focused down on you, on where you are and how your garden grows and the conditions in your backyard. You might have neighbours that have got 100-metre tall gum trees that shade your yard. So therefore, your sun may be really limited. It may also mean that it's cooler, that it's damper. Look at your lawns. Are your lawns growing really well, or are they really stunted? Is it boggy? Is it wet? That'll have an impact on the environment that your trees are growing in. So therefore, it may mean that your growing period might be lessened. It may impact on the type of trees that you can have in your yard for starters, but all these things circle around to, okay, well, that's a general guide, but for my little square, my little plot in life, my little bonsai yard, my bonsai garden that I've got, this is what I have to do. And there's things that you can't control. You can't control what's happening outside your fence, and you can't control the amount of sun that you get. You can't control the wind that comes through your yard. You can't control how wet and damp things stay around your yard as well. So positioning of your trees, number one priority, always has been, always will be. Don't let those inner areas get affected like I did with my Scots pine, if you can help it. But the timing of the task really need to be something that you're thinking about, that you're making your priority. And yeah, sure, follow the mass, follow the crowd at the start, but fine tune it. Fine tune it and work within what you've got. And this is where photos are great. Logbooks are awesome. Start this year. Start now. Start where you go through and go, okay, I'm going to pick 2-3 of my trees. Don't just pick one, because it might be super strong or it might be a little bit weaker. Pick, say, 2 or 3 of your trees. Start with decandling and take photos. Write notes. Okay, when did I do this one? When did I, pick a small, medium, and large. When did I do this? When did I do that? When did I do that? All right, so what do they all look like in a month's time? What do I look like in 2 months' time? What do I look like in 3 months' time? Just document it, just for giggles, just for your own amusement. To say, I did the larger one on, this date, 1st of December. I did the medium one on the 10th of December. I did the small one on the 20th of December. And do all the others in between. But just have a look at it and say, okay, well, what do they look like? So when it gets to a period in time, then look for your stop point and go, okay, get a ruler out and say, okay, it is the start of the second and last month of autumn or fall, depending on where you are. So for me, let's say it's autumn. First of April. 1st of April. I walk out there with a ruler. And I go, okay, small, medium, large. My candles that have grown, I've got my smallest one is this, my medium one is that, and my largest is that. Go through all the different trees and just make a note of it. And then do it on the last month of autumn, June. May, sorry, 1st of May. Get out there, do a measurement. Then get to the first week or first date in winter and do the same measurement and go, okay, so have they grown? Have they extended? When did that growing period stop? Like it's got to be somewhere in that range so okay, well, if I started here and I finished here, then this is I can now pinpoint quite accurately because I've had no more growth, no more extension on the needle length or on the candle length or the shoot length that's come out from this period in autumn to that period in autumn to that period in winter. So therefore my stop is there. And so that will help you not only with working out your timing and measure the results. Am I happy with what I got after that period of time doing that process, starting here, finishing here? Am I happy with that? Yes or no? But it also means for you when the stop point is, you might find that, hey, it's still continuing to grow. So therefore measure it the second month of winter and just make sure that it's definitely stopped because it affects your feeding as well. The tree's still in that growth period. Does your fertilizing then need to push out? If it stopped earlier, then does your feeding need to stop earlier around the yard because it's just a waste? What are you feeding a tree that's gone dormant for? What's the purpose of that? So this is where becoming your own bonsai expert. Look at what's happening in your yard and get to know it intimately, better than anyone, better than me, better than your neighbor, because it's going to have such a massive impact on your future development and advancement of your bonsai and your satisfaction. Knowing what's happening in your yard, there's nothing better than that. So I would strongly suggest that this timing, there is a generalization, but knuckle it down to your area. Become a scientist, be that tree lover that you are, and just get to know them a little bit better and pick a species and say, well, when I do this is the outcome. Don't be told by other people that, hey, this is wrong, that's wrong, this is right, you should only do it this way. Work it out for yourself. Work out, use that guideline, use that help, that care sheet, that monthly calendar of what we do. Fine tune it so it's specific for you, and I guarantee you and your trees will take massive, massive quantum leaps forward. Okay, let's wrap up the podcast, and thank you very much for listening in. I hope you found it enjoyable. Hope you've got that inspiration too to get out there with a notebook and a pen and your phone, take photos, start recording things, and just get to know it a little bit better, a bit more thoroughly, and really take your trees to the next level. I know I did a lot of it, and I still think about it a lot now. And I do take a hell of a lot of photos, and I look back and go, geez, I wonder when I did that last year, and when did I do it the year before? And I sort of scroll through my photos and just double check and see where things are at, and suddenly see how things have changed and developed, and the inner areas of your tree, like really that shading is an absolute nightmare for me. It has an impact. You'll find that if I'm going to have a pest issue, it's often in those inner areas. It's the most important part of the tree, and I get crook at myself for letting things like this happen. Stop looking at the overall beauty of the tree and knuckle down a little bit local and see exactly what's going on, because it'll have a big impact. All right, so welcome to summer. As I said, this coming out on the first day of our summer period. Summer's a nicer time. I do enjoy the slightly warmer weather. Hopefully the weather starts to settle down and starts to cruise. There is that extreme heat that comes with it somewhere down the track. But from your bonsai point of view and from the workload point of view, it starts to ease off a little bit. It starts to give you a bit of a breather. There's, natives will still be kicking along. I find for me, my junipers and cypress, they need a bit of TLC, a bit of love around this time of the year, because I can take my foot off the gas with other things because I've got them all done. Just watch how hard you're pushing your trees during summer period. I do tend to now take it a lot easier than what I used to. and I don't put them under as much stress as what I used to either. So just be mindful that it is a stressful time for your trees, and that you don't want to push them too hard, and just baby them through, because it's going to get hotter. The start of summer will be fine, no issues, but I'm not worried about that. I'm worried about those last couple of months, and heading towards the autumn period that sort of can really spike with temperature and start to do some serious damage. So I'll look after them now to make sure that they're going to get through that period. Anyway, I hope you've enjoyed the podcast. I've enjoyed presenting it for you, and I will see you next week as always. And make sure you give your trees a big cuddle for me, because I love them, and I'm sure that you love them a lot more than what I do. Thanks for listening in. As always, until next time, happy bonsai. Make sure you stay in touch and subscribe. Thanks for watching, and as always, happy bonsai.